Hello, YouTubers, friends, compatriots, bootlickers, shills, debt slaves, serfs, peasants, vassals, minions, meat sacks. I'm a useful idiot. Welcome. And I was looking at a study. There's an international group that has a democracy index, and it shows that authoritarianism is spreading in the world. And I thought that was pretty alarming. 6% of the population of the globe lives under democracy right now. And 10 years ago, 13% of the global population lived under democracy. So democracy is losing out. And I particularly find that interesting, framing it in the sense that the United States has spent decades and decades with the whole idea of spreading democracy. And we've shoveled money all over the world, and we have U.S. military in almost all the countries in the world. And yet democracy is declining and authoritarianism is spreading. Right now, 15% of the countries in the world, according to this report, have a full democracy, while 36% of the countries in the world today live under full authoritarianism. And it's interesting, they have different categories. They have one, authoritarian regimes. Number two, hybrid regimes that are part democracy and part authoritarianism. And then we have three, a flawed democracy, and then number four is a full democracy. And so the full democracies are at a historic low. And I also found it funny that over the last 10 years or so, 83 countries have been downgraded. And so they've gone from one category to the next. So once again, that shows that democracy is losing its hold in a lot of countries. And Portugal, Estonia, and the Czech Republic were actually three of the countries that were upgraded to full democracies. And France and Korea, of all places, were downgraded to flawed democracies. So even countries like France and Korea that used to be categorized as full democracies are now flawed democracies. And it's no surprise when you look at the whole list. I'm not going to go through the whole list, but I will attach it below. I've been trying to put more attachments on. The top countries with full democracies are countries like Norway, New Zealand, Sweden, Switzerland, Finland, Denmark, a lot of countries in Scandinavia, Ireland, the Netherlands, Luxembourg, Australia, Taiwan, Canada, and Germany. And one thing that's interesting about that, Germany being at the top of full democracies, seems a little perplexing at this point when we see what's going on in Germany, considering the fact that you can be jailed, you could be persecuted and jailed for insulting politicians in public, and now you can be persecuted and jailed for things you post online. And if you're somebody that posts online and then you're another person and you spread what somebody posted online, then you can also be potentially arrested and put in jail. So this whole idea of a full democracy has obviously got some flexibility to it. And when you look at the map, again, there's not much of a big surprise. Most of Africa and most of Asia is authoritarian, except for a lot of countries that you would imagine, like Singapore and the like. But in spite of all the efforts by the United States in Africa, particularly in the last 10 or 20 years, authoritarianism continues to dominate in Africa. So what are the lowest countries, the ones that are authoritarian, the worst ones? Turkmenistan, Sudan, Syria, Central African Republic, North Korea, Myanmar, Afghanistan, Russia, Iran, and Yemen. And once again, that shows that there's some flexibility in these categorizations. I'm not sure if I would categorize Russia as a full authoritarian state. In some respects, they certainly have a lot more freedoms than they did under the Soviet Union. And they do seem to have a certain degree of civil rights. So I'm not necessarily, I don't necessarily think I'd put Russia and North Korea in the same category. But I found that's pretty illuminating. As I said, I'll put attachment below, and you can look at all the countries' ratings and get a better idea yourself. I didn't want to get into the whole list of these countries, but it is an interesting trend when you would think that democracy going into the 21st century would continue to expand and dominate. Instead, it's the opposite. And one could make the argument that a lot of countries that are supposedly democracies could be downgraded into flawed democracies and then hybrid regimes. And it can be stealth a lot of times. We've certainly seen trends in the United States and Canada, for example, that show traits of semi-authoritarian government. Now, of course, a lot of people make the argument right now that Trump is a great example of that, but I would argue that it's just part of a trend in the United States moving towards a lack of free speech and censorship and the curtailing of a broad spectrum of civil rights. So maybe historically, we are seeing a trend towards the world moving towards more authoritarian regimes. And of course, we've seen that before. There was a lot of authoritarian regimes in the early 20th century in places that are considered democracies now, like Italy and Germany. And it was a very respectable, fascism was fairly respectable ideology at the time. It was only after the wars and the results of these fascist states were exposed that the fascism completely lost its appeal. But interesting historical trend and not a good one. I'm a useful idiot. Don't you be one too?